if you're ever in Florida, I think it was in Southern Living for one of the best barbecue places in the South.
All right, let's try that.
I mean, there's eventually, if there's ever conferences again,
Okay.
then
Yeah.
there's always come down.
What's a conference?
I know. What is that thing? But yeah, Southern Living named it one of the best barbecue joints.
All right, so it's 3 now. We'll give it like 1 minute more, 1.5, and then we'll go to start.
It's funny, they did that on a town hall for a company yesterday. Posed the question and played the Jeopardy music. I thought it was funny.
All right. So I think, being the holiday weekend and all, attendance might be a little bit lighter, so we can go ahead and get started, and maybe some people will also join while we're underway here. So, all right. So I'm Bill Conforti with Association Analytics. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual discussion series, where we bring together leaders and learners each week in fun and engaging sessions aimed at optimizing business results, staying relevant in these challenging times, and learning some cool stuff in the process. Today's session is about Power BI for association professionals, not data scientists. No disrespect to our data scientist friends, but our main focus today will be to give you some idea of things that you can do with data visualizations. If you've never tried this before, you'll leave knowing how to get started. If you're more advanced, we'll show you how to take things to the next level. And if you're an expert, you can apply in our career space.
You can grill us with questions afterward.
No, but today we're going to talk about a few things. So we're going to intro data visualizations and tools. We're going to see how even a single person can get started for free and start that journey towards data-informed decisions. We'll look at some more advanced things to build value and your expertise. We'll talk about storytelling with data, and then we'll look at ways that you can get there faster. A couple of notes for our new attendees. So we're going to have a recording of today's session that'll be available on the registration site. If you missed any of the previous discussions, the entire series is also available. Hey, Brian, if you have that handy, if you could put the link where attendees can find the recording, that'd be awesome. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. So use the chat tool to connect with others, introduce yourselves, and the Q&A button to submit questions for the panel. So speaking of panels, let's do some introductions. On your left is Tamsin Haught. She's a senior analyst and A2's longest tenured full-time employee. She has more than 15 years experience in the association space. Her background is in data analytics, of course, but also project management and SQL. She's an expert with BI tools like Power BI and Tableau, and helping clients to analyze data, build visualizations, and generally to make better, faster decisions. So quick question, Tamsin, how did you get into working with data, and what do you like most about it?
I probably got involved in data when I was first working for association. I was in the membership department, and we had lost our IT person, who at that time was IT/DBA. So they needed someone to help out. So it got split between two of us because I seemed slightly interested at the time. They decided to dive into SQL training. I know I like data because I like problem solving. I like uncovering issues. I like seeing what's happening. Like when I was a kid, I loved logic problems. To me, this is just an extension of that.
All right, cool, thanks, Tamsin. And on your right is Matt Braun. So Matt is a data analyst with A2 Client Specialty Food Association. He spent the last 2 years there of more than 20 years in the technology space. So Matt's passionate about and enthusiastic and motivated by delivering actionable data insights. He's proud of his ability to communicate using data, as well as challenge and innovate within an organization looking to use data as a strategic asset. So SFA is a member-based trade association founded in 1952, and they're currently representing 3,500 businesses. The SFA vision is to shape the future of food. Their members are specialty food artisans, purveyors, importers, and entrepreneurs, as well as distributors, retailers, and others involved in the specialty food trade. So Matt, same question for you. How did you get into working with data, and what do you like most about it?
Sure. Actually, probably about 15 years ago, I was a true developer, old school COBOL DB2 CICS programmer for a money market fund. Terrible job. And I had a friend who worked in the retail space at a kid retailer, Aeropostale, if people know it. And they needed someone to come over and run their BI area. All new to me. It actually was MicroStrategy and someone that's still in the BI space. So I learned how to, to slice and dice some of their data, looking at things from size breakouts by store, color analysis, looking at just the size of their store, small, medium, large. So you started to lay some foundational components to how companies start to look at their data and to make decisions on it. So it was a great foundation to get into it. So I did retail for several companies, Aeropostale, Bloomingdale's, another perfume company, and then I jumped over to the association world.
Awesome, cool, thanks, Matt. All right, so let's take a look then at the agenda. So we're going to do a quick, just for fun. We'll jump into an intro into data visualization. So I'll talk through that a little bit. Tamsin's going to show you some cool things that you can do with Power BI and how you can get started with all of that for free. We'll look at a few slightly more advanced use cases, more like getting into something that you would do personally to something that you would do for business. Matt will take us through some storytelling with data and show some examples of things that he's done with SFA. We're going to take a really brief, like 30,000-foot tour of some of the things that we're doing with Acumen to kind of understand where you can take all of this eventually, and then we'll wrap up with some closing thoughts and questions. All right, so just for fun. And I did see at least one person checking in from Canada. So I think there was Canada on there. So apologies for that, but this is about Independence Day leading into the holiday. And since we have SFA on the call, and because there's not a lot of other things to do except eat right over this weekend, because we're a lot of us are.
It was Happy Canada Day yesterday, so it wasn't. I think Canada Day was yesterday.
I did not know that. Self-centered Americans. I didn't know that. So anyway, so the just for fun topic is, what are you up to over the weekend? But more specifically, what are you planning to eat, right? And so if you can go in the chat and maybe talk about that a little bit. I just want to share one quick thing. So I'm going to do barbecue. I think a lot of people are ribs and chicken. This thing up in the corner here, this smoky paprika chipotle. It's from this company called Victoria's Gourmet, and I never would plug something like this, but it's amazing. Like if you take this and make a dry rub for your barbecue, you won't be sorry. You can order that online on Amazon and mix it with some chili powder and garlic and a little bit of sugar. It'll be the best dry rub you've ever had, I promise. All right, so, and then of course, we have the hot dog eating contest. I don't know if anybody's a fan of that, but
no,
I kind of like it. All right, barbecue, grilled veggies, 74 hot dogs, right?
Ooh.
Anyway, okay, guys. So continue that conversation. I'll be curious to see what's happening in the world of food this weekend. All right. So we're going to go then to our poll question, which, not surprisingly, is how often does your association use visualizations to understand data? All right. So there's a couple of poll questions today, and they're mainly just to get a baseline for what your associations are already doing in the space and kind of your level of experience and things like that. So how often, never, rarely, sometimes, or often. So can we put the poll question up? There we go.
I'm not allowed to vote, but
I
I
was,
would
I
often.
was about to say, I can't vote.
No.
You would
Can
hope
I,
our answers would be often.
can I do a write-in at least?
That would skew our results now, wouldn't it? All right, cool. So I'm gonna go on to the next slide, and then we can put up the results in just a second. Okay. So visualizations are a big part of what Microsoft, I mean, and others, but Microsoft. This is a Microsoft slide. It's called the evolution of BI. Right. So in the first wave, the blue one, we kind of have the old school way, request the reports from the one person or a small handful of people in your organization that know how to run queries and get things from the from your AMS, right? So the second wave is where a few people kind of work horizontally across the organization. They're the analysts, and they kind of work with the data mostly and kind of serve it up to others, right? So I think SFA is a little bit beyond that, but guys like Matt, work in that kind of capacity where they they work a lot with the data, interpret it, and give the results to others. And really what we're trying to do, and what many of you on the call are, aspire towards, is that third wave where it's kind of accessible to everyone, right? There's still analysts, right? Matt and Tamsin, of course, are still really valuable, but at the end of the day, we want something where the average business staff, right? The non-technical, the non-data scientist person, can access the data and find the information and make the decisions that they need to make. Right. So a big part of that are visualization tools. Right. So there's a few of them that are popular here. Right. Of course, Power BI, which we're talking about mostly today. There's Tableau. Google has a sometimes free product called Data Studio. Click was really popular a few years back. And then there are a bunch of others. Right. There are lots of tools in this space, and it would be interesting, right, to take a look at some of those. But at the end of the day, you have to choose one. And so how would you go about doing that? So the way we did it is we looked at things like, what's the cost, right? I mean, Power BI is quite inexpensive, relative to some of those others. It's even free in some cases, depending on your licensing through Microsoft. The desktop product can be downloaded by anyone, and that is always free. It's easy to use, right? People are familiar with using Excel and other tools in the Microsoft stack, so a lot of it is quite familiar. And then resources, right? So there are hundreds of thousands of companies, millions of individuals that are using Power BI, and what that means is that there's a lot of free training, free resources. We're going to talk about some of those later. So if somebody is inclined to want to learn about Power BI, it's quite easy to do so, and you can probably do it without even spending any money on it. And the last thing in terms of resources is, what about Microsoft itself, right? So this number at the bottom here, 2.5 billion, that was the 2018 number for R&D spend, right? And that was out of 15 billion, excuse me, in total. And so that was the biggest line item, right, for any of the Microsoft products in that year. So in 2019, it went up a little bit. I don't know the actual number for Power BI, but it was close to 18 billion in R&D spending across Microsoft, right? And a lot of that is to the Power apps, right? Power BI, and then the broader, cloud infrastructure and things. So how that helps us, right, and how that helps you is that there's, literally new improvements, new features, things being added on a daily basis. There are releases monthly, and it's really, keeping up with all the things that those hundreds of thousands of users want to do with the product. All right. So here's the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? So here on the left is 2015. You see Microsoft is kind of down here with the rest of these guys: MicroStrategy, SAP, and Click. And Tableau is kind of up there by itself in that Magic Quadrant. And what happens is, over those 5 years, so 2020, Microsoft is kind of way up here by itself, right? And that's because of all that investment they made, because of all those users that came on board and kind of drove the product development and everything. And so it's kind of the undisputed leader in the space today. All right. So with that, I'm going to go to our second poll question. Can we see the results of the first one before we do that? Thanks, Brian. How often does your association use visualizations to understand? So a few people said never. So kind of like almost half are in the rarely or never. Sometimes and often is about the same. So interesting. I'm not sure if we put that on a chart, I'm not sure what my interpretation of that would be, right? It's
Majority of people are rarely or sometimes, so have
Yeah.
some experience.
So I guess the good news is that you know, the way that the subject matter in today's talk is, it's really kind of mostly targeted for the never or the rarelys, but it's not going to be boring for the sometimes. And I think there's some parts at the end that are going to be interesting for the often. So a little something for everybody there. All right. So our second poll question then is, what's your current skill level? Right. So the first one is more about your association. This one is about you as an individual. So we just want to get a feel for how many people are using tools, Power BI or similar tools now, and that, you know, and we might adjust, you know, how these guys describe things going forward a little bit based on that. Okay. Did we actually put the poll up and I X'd it out? Okay, good. I couldn't remember if I were asking for the results, if we're asking for the poll. Okay, so never used about 40%. Okay, so most are in the never or novice, and we've got a few advanced people on the call. And as I said, you know, you guys, you know, it's association and I'm just kidding. All right, so good. So here's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basics, right? So how to connect to a single source, some very basic visuals and charts, chart types, how to build a report, right? So Tamsin's going to show you, you know, really quickly how you can build a report. It's kind of easy to get started. You can spend a long time perfecting it and adding additional things to it, but a basic report is pretty easy to do. Share and export, right? So one of the things that you'll want to do, you're going to build that report and then you're going to want to show it to your manager, right? You're going to want to send it to your executive team. And ideally you can take some of the lessons, you know, that you learned today from Tams and from Matt and use those, right, to create something that's compelling, right? So that's the basics. Next steps are, you know, a little bit more advanced, right? So maybe you have two sources, right? They're nothing complex, but it's at least more than one source, which means that you have to make some joins, right? And it's nothing complex, like you have to be a database expert or anything like that. So we'll show you how to do that. And then we have to deal with data wrangling a little bit. I'm using air quotes here because it's not really a lot of wrangling with two tabular sources. It's very straightforward, you know, but it kind of introduces the idea that anytime you get outside of one single table, then you may have to do some adjustments to the data. And then finally, updates and refresh, right? So if we have one single data source, even if it's one single data source, you know, things change, right? Maybe it's your membership data or your events data or something like that. And even if it's an export, you know, from a system, you still have to go back and refresh that periodically. So we can talk about that a little bit as well. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tamsin.
Thank you, Bill. All right, so as Bill mentioned, we're going to be walking through just some basic visualizations, how to connect to a data source. So a pretty common scenario is you'll have an Excel file. So for example, let's say I have an Excel file and it's just a list of current members. I have their start date, I have their end date, I have what their member type is, where I either got it from a query from a database or, you know, myself or someone from IT just sent me a list. So inside of Power BI, you have these data connectors. I'm going to use a get data right now just so I can show you some of the options they have in there. So I'm going to do get data and then more. And then this is going to list pretty much all the options that you have. You can see there's quite a few. If you have a SQL database, you can connect to that. Postgres, if you have Redshift as well, they have data connectors to that. So there's a lot of options here. But right now we're just going to do Excel, just nice straightforward Excel file. So I click on Excel. I'm going to find my Excel document, and that's that membership demo data. And it's going to pull that in for me. So list any tabs I have or any sheets I have. So you can multi-select if you have more than one. So I just have the one, so I'm just going to check next to sheet 1, and it gives me a little preview. So just I can make sure that what I'm pulling in is what I expect to pull in. And I just click on load. Depending on your file size, this can be either really fast or really slow. This isn't a very large one, so it's going to be pretty quick bringing this in.
So Tamsin, the man rep, just a quick question.
Yeah.
So we noticed that right next to the load button, there was one that said transform data. I was just curious if, you know, for the nevers or the rarelies, you know, on the call, do you recommend using, if you want to do some manipulation to the data, do you recommend doing it there, or would you do it in your Excel file prior to bringing it in?
It depends on really what you're trying to do. Some transformations you have to do inside of Power BI. For example, if it doesn't recognize the field type, if it doesn't recognize a date, you're going to need to do that inside of here, inside of Power BI itself. If you're doing additional columns, that's all going to be inside of Power BI, but you probably want to do some basic maybe checks on your data inside of Excel before you bring it in. But there's a lot you can do under transform data. I'm going to just open it up real quick just to show you. Where you can, you know, delete rows out or delete columns out. You can delete duplicate values, things like that. You can add new columns. You can change like what the data type is. So if I want this not to be a whole number, but a decimal number, you can do all of that inside of transform data.
Good, thank you.
Let me close that. So you notice it came in, my tab was named sheet 1 in Excel, so that's what it brought it in as. I probably want to rename that because that's not very descriptive. I can right click on that and I can do rename, and I'm just going to call this current members. Just so it's just easier naming. So if I add more data sources and more tables, then I know what's in each one. So something that's pretty common is when you're doing something with membership is counting your members. So inside of Power BI, they have something called measures and columns that you can create, and that's just formulas. So think about like in Excel, a measure is just like a formula where you're summing and you're counting something. So next to current members, I have the little more options. If I click on that, I can do a new measure. And this uses a language called DAX. It's data analysis expressions. It's used in Excel and Power Pivot, Power Query. So it's pretty common throughout the Microsoft toolkit. And there's actually quite a few training courses, and we do have a slide later on kind of talking about some of the resources you can use to kind of dig into DAX. But I'm just going to do two simple ones. So the first one, so this, before the equal sign, I give it a name. This is going to be my measure name. So it's going to be current members. And then I have to tell it what I want it to do. Do I want it to count something? Do I want to sum something? So you can see this in my list, I have individual members. So I'm going to do a count of like the individual key. And I say, okay, however many individual keys are in there, that's how many members. I just click on enter and it creates it for me. Then along the top, I have under measure tools, you can see I have some options on how to format it. So I can make it have decimal places. I can make it have a comma, which I do. So I'm going to say, go ahead and force it to have a comma. So then if I go into the thousands, it's doing a comma between the thousands. So I'm now going to create a visualization based on this new measure. So I'm going to create using these visualizations on the right. Inside of Power BI, you get what is this, like 20 something visualizations out of the box that work inside of Power BI. You know, you have your bar chart, your column chart, you have this pie chart, a donut chart. I'm going to do a card one because I just want to have on the top left of my screen, what's our overall count of members. So I click on that viz type, and then I can drag here under fields what I want to have displayed. So it's showing current members is 11,000. You notice it's doing this 11K thing, which is not very exact. I don't know about you guys, but I'm assuming when you report number of members, if you say, oh, we have 11,000, someone's gonna be like, well, is that 11,100? It is 11,200. We wanna be a little bit more exact. So for every visualization you have, and this should be familiar for you guys who work with Microsoft a lot, you have that little paint roller bar that's format. So if I click on format, you can see under data label, which that's what this is, it's a data label, I can change the units. I'm changing it to none. You notice when I change it to none, it's now showing the exact number rather than like 11K. And what Bill was talking about before of wrangling your data or data issues, you notice on my current members, I did a count of individual key. This is kind of where you have to use your own business knowledge. If you know a person may have more than one membership, so maybe they have 3 member types, you have to determine, are you counting them once or are you counting them 3 times? So I'm gonna do real quick, I'm gonna change this count just to show you the difference to a distinct count. So you notice when I change this to distinct count, that number is dropped by about 300. So you can see using that different formula, distinct count versus a count, I'm getting 2 different results.
Right. And just for the benefit of the rarelies and the nevers, effectively what you did is you reduced, you eliminated your duplicate records, right? So correct. These are individual members, not memberships.
Correct. All right. Now, something that's also common that you probably get asked a lot is how much money or how much you have in membership sales. So I'm going to create another measure. Again, going to the top right, clicking on new measure. And I'm going to call this one membership sales. This one, I'm just going to do a sum of my sales amount. So I know I have this column in here, net amount. So I can scroll down, click on membership net amount, and now that's going to sum up that field of net amount. So I'll have a new measure called membership sales, and it's doing it by that sales net amount. So now let's say I want to see that sales amount, but I want to see by member type. If I want to see what members are paying by member type, so we know where most of the money is coming in. So maybe I want to do a bar chart for this. So if I click bar chart, you notice I have a few different options here. I have, before it was just field, but now I have the axis, I have the legend, I have values. So what I'm going to do is I can now bring in member type to the axis. If I bring membership sales to the values, and the values is going to be the x-axis. You see now I have membership sales by member type. And I can move that around, like if I want it up next to current members, you can see this is just dragging and dropping. It's not very complicated. I can just move things to where I want it. And I can resize as I want as well. So now I'm showing member sales by member type. For those of you who work maybe in marketing or have to do a lot of external communication, I'm guessing the one thing you noticed was this ugly member underscore type underscore name, which when you query your database, a lot of times that's what you get out is you get these field names that are just terrible looking. You can overwrite this So see how it says member type name here? If I double click there, I can rename it to member type and see it updated my viz to now say member type rather than, you know, with the underscores. Now maybe I want people to be able to see what the sales are. I don't want you to have to like hover over something to see the sales. Again, on this viz, I'm gonna have format. So if I click on format, I have this data labels here. If I click that, it turns it on. And you see we have that similar issue we had with this membership card where it's just kind of showing you up to the millions. If we open this up, again, we can change the display units to be none, and it shows me the whole value. So obviously right now, this number looks terrible because it's really hard to kind of count out the zeros to figure out exactly what's being displayed. So for similar to what I did to current members, I'm gonna wanna do to membership sales. So if I click on the measure membership sales, you can see again, I have all these format options. And one of them is this dollar bill sign, so that's currency. If I click on that, I can choose what currency I want this to display as. So I can say I want it to show as English US dollars, and it updates my formatting. Bill, are you looking at the chat? Because if not, I was going to move on before I.
Yeah, I'm looking at chat. Yep.
Okay, just interrupt me if there's any question.
Nope. I was worried about what people are drinking. So.
I'm drinking water right now. I hope, at least I hope Matt is as well. So now I'm going to do some food network magic. We're going to pretend I just threw it in the oven and it came out all done.
Yes.
So now, ta-da! So now we have maybe this larger viz where we have a lot more things on here, where we have sales, count, renew count, new member count, and a map.
Okay, so Tamsin, one question before we move on is, one of the things that that Power BI is really interesting for is making the different charts interactive with each other. Do we have anything like that on this one?
Yes, actually, it is automatically going to be turned on. So for example, what Bill is saying, if I click on associate members, you can see it updates the count here. It's 1254 and 192 new member counts. So for the most part, it's normally turned on automatically. You normally would have to turn it off. So it always has that interactive feature where if I click on one thing, so if I click on individual members, it's updating everything to be individual members.
Okay.
So Tamsin, just for the audience, I think it would be a good thing to just, because you went through and explained some stuff, to do what you just did as the end result. For somebody that's an intermediate to beginner, how long do you think it would take them to do this? Because I think people are thinking.
First time, I would say first time, it probably would take 2 to 4 hours, probably the first time. And most of that's going to be probably once, because creating this viz, you know, any one of these vizes are probably going to only take you about 5 to 10 minutes. Most of the time you spend is playing on formatting. In all honesty, you tend to be like, do I want this here? Do I want that over there? But creating a viz like this, as you saw when I was showing you the before, making this visualization, it took me only a couple minutes. It's drag and drop.
Cool. All right. So if anybody has questions about this for Tamsin or for Matt, go ahead and put those in the chat or the Q&A. You know, for those nevers and the rarelies, hope you got something useful out of this, and that presenting something like this to your senior leadership is probably going to be a little bit more effective than those Excel sheets or AMS extracts that you might be used to. So, okay, so with that, we're going to turn things over to, unless, is there something else, Tamsin, that you were going to cover?
I was going to show a quick join.
Ah, okay.
If we have the time.
Yeah, we do. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm jumping ahead of myself.
It's okay. So you notice in my membership data, I just have member type. I don't have a ton of demographic data. So sometimes it'll be like, we want to have something about job function or gender in here. Can you pull that in as well? So you don't always have to go back to IT and be like, can you run this same query, but pull also this data? If you have this other file with that information, I can pull that in. So again, I can just do, I'm just going to connect to Excel, individual demographic information. We're going to speed through this one because it's very similar to what we just did. Rename real quick. So maybe I want to do just a donut chart with gender and do it by show number of members by gender. So you may spot right away, this looks kind of hinky because you're like 50-50 split. The likelihood is low. But you notice the numbers are exactly the same. And that's because you have to establish a relationship between these two Excel files or these two tables. And now that means is you have to find some unique key that says this membership record belongs to this person. And that's honestly the hardest part about doing these joins, is knowing which you need to join on. So I know record number is the same as individual key. So I can go to this modeling tab and then click on manage relationships, and I can create a relationship between those two tables. So I say I want to create a relationship between current members and demographic, and I want to do it based on individual key to record number. And all this, Power BI normally determines the best option for you. Changing this around is very advanced, but for the most part, it normally determines what this relationship should be. So you normally can just hit OK and move on. Okay. So you see now these are joined. And when I go back, now you can see my gender is now showing probably a bit more accurately, 41% female, and then about 59% male. So it's now no longer split because it's now has a relationship between the two tables.
Interestingly enough, there's no unknowns, right? There's usually some blanks or unknowns in the
demo data.
In the real data, right?
So
utopian world.
I know. So then when this is ready and you've done all this work and you're ready to share, you have a couple options. You can go to the file and you could do export to just a PDF, and it's just going to pop this up into a PDF document that you can just distribute to everyone else. Or if you want to share via the web, that's when you have to look at things like Power BI service, or using something like Acumen, where you want to share it with a larger group.
Cool. All right.
Now, I was to say the hard part about this is you can spend all this time on these visualizations, and then you send it out to your executive team, and their reaction is going to be like, I don't really, that's nice. So really, the next step on this is really figuring out what's important to your audience and how do you want to display it to them in a way that they can consume it easily.
Okay. Tamsin, quick question. We had, Matt's answered it. It was about multiple joins. And yeah, so Matt's answered that. So with that, we're going to go ahead and.
There's one more question too. I see that someone says, as you mentioned, their filtering is automatic. Can we do selective filtering? Like I select one part of the one chart, only select. Yes, you can adjust those. The way how things are filtered. Tamsin, can you go back to your thing real quick?
Yeah, one sec. Let me get to, so I can't share screen.
And
so yes, as
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. So if I don't want it to interact, they have something under format called edit interactions. And so I can say, I don't want this one to impact this one. So you can see it says none. If I click on that, it turns it off. So it says that means when I click on this viz, it will update these, but it won't update these.
And I
So
think there's other ones too. You can do it that it's only highlights them versus,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, there's quite a few options on the interactions.
Okay, that's awesome. Hopefully that it would cover questions that answered your question. So thank you.
Okay. So yes, we're going to let Matt tell us about storytelling with data.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. So as Tamsin, thank you very much, Tamsin. That was great.
You're welcome.
As everyone heard the word data through the last, 25 or 30 minutes, I always think of it as telling a story. To me, data is one thing. It's cold, it's factual, and it's objective. Nobody wants to hear a number. So there's a really good book out there called Data Story by Nancy Duarte. And one of her favorite quote, or one of my favorite quotes is, the stories data would tell if there was a teller to tell them well. So the way I think of it is stories are warm, they're emotional, they're subjective, and they can, for most people, they elicit a response. It creates a reaction. So to me, when you're building up your dashboards, and I'll go through how I'm going to set one up for you as well, and what I did in the basis of my data, I want you to think about what the story, who's your audience, what questions you're going to address, what is the context of those questions you're going to answer, and who's your audience? Is your audience a marketing team? Is your audience an executive team? Or is your audience something, in a combination, a hybrid approach? And then I think when you're answering those, I think you need to come up with some sort of a point of view. So you're coming up with something to tell that story. Okay, so here's a perfect example, data versus a story. I found this today. I thought it was perfect. It was talking about tickets that were received by like a help desk and whether they were processed or not. So on the left, you're going to see your traditional bar chart versus tickets that were received and tickets that were processed. It gives you a good idea. It gives you an idea so you can see number of tickets there were, in each month. Does it give you a reason why towards the end of this year that there's sort of a drop off as the disparity between ones that were received and ones that were processed? Now you take the visualization that's on the right and you see that they've now added some annotation about 2 employees that quit in May. So now there's a reason. It's telling you there's a story. So you can see that now there's a reason why they did it. So I want everyone, as you start to think about when you develop your dashboards, first of all, don't start jumping into it. Understand the data, and then start to ask yourself some questions. Okay, explore and explain. A couple things I want you to think about before you develop your dashboards is, one, you want to identify a problem or an opportunity. And then second, well, you want to do some level of explaining. When you're doing your visualizations, you want to either resolve the problem or create some opportunity. Maybe there's an opportunity for your marketing team to do better, or you're explaining that they did an amazing job. So when you have an event, you see that there is a large increase as far as the people that are attending your event. So I want to kind of put context into the dashboard that I built for you as far as what happens at my association. At my association, we do 2 huge events every year, one in January and one in June. So it's called the Specialty Food Association. So our event is based on food, and our events generate probably 80% of our revenue. Yes, 80% of our revenue over the course of the year. So when we have our events, our dashboards that explain how our registration is going is a huge deal. And also our association kind of has I think an inverse approach to things compared to some of the other associations. And how I mean that is, our members are the exhibitors at the show. So they have booths for food. Yes, food, chocolate, cheeses, meats, you name it. Yeah, I'm getting you all hungry. I'm getting you all hungry. It's a huge deal for them. And then what we have is our attendees are people that are typically other manufacturers or producers of food, distributors across the nation. They're big buyers for your big box and brick and mortar stores, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's. and some other things. So when we have our shows, it's a big event. So I want you, like when I develop some of our dashboards, to think about the questions that the organization itself will want to know about the event.
Okay.
And
You can go ahead and take control anytime, Matt.
yep. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go into, perfect. Thanks, Bill. Okay. So when I think about things and what insights we can derive from our show, I start to ask myself some questions, and what questions some of the people in my organization might want to look at. How many people are registered for show? Simple, straightforward. What is the cumulative registrations over time? So maybe you may see a spike at a particular point because the marketing team sent out a mailer, or they did an email blast to 100,000 people. We want to look at gender breakdown. Maybe we want to see age range. People keep saying that our show has gotten younger and younger over time. Registrations by job title. Are we getting a lot of people that are decision makers and people have the choice to invest money in this? Or are we talking about people that are, marketing people or just data analysts like Tamsin and I that are attending the show? And then maybe just to look at a geo profile and a breakdown of the people that are attending the show. So those are some core things, at least I think about, but those things I think pertain to things like Tamsin did before. Those are membership questions too. Those could be marketing questions. So what I'm going to show you next, and I want, like I said, this is why I asked Tamsin this question earlier, is how long did it take her to develop that? And it didn't take her that long to develop the dashboard. So the dashboard I will show you in a minute, it literally took me 45 minutes to develop it. And I don't expect anyone who said they were a newbie or only delved into the Power BI for a long time to think that they're going to do it in 45 minutes. But I want you to lay some groundwork that this is not a huge deal. And there's a lot that you can learn, but you can easily get into the Power BI right in the ground and, in the basement and just start. So this is a finished product that I did. And then I'm going to talk about why I say about the whole story thing. So here's my finished product. Okay. So see, these are some it's got a lot on this one pager, but it talks about a lot of different things. And those questions that I had asked on the prior slide or the prior page, talks about how many people register for our show, how many people, what was the total purchases, how much people paid for the show. The same thing that Tamsin was talking about, the gender breakdown, how our age ranges were broken down. What was our registrations by business type? Because this is important to us. For us, we're looking for a lot of the buyers to be at our show. Who's attending by job title? And then I broke down things by cumulative registrations by date. I want to impress upon everybody that's listening. This to me is a big deal. Same thing that Tamsin did it. For the most part, my main data that's listed here was a data dump from our registration vendor that we used. For the most part, I used one measure on most of my dashboards that were here. I basically did a count of the number, similar to what Tamsin did, a count of the people that were here. And then I did some level of slicing and dicing based on the data that I provided and the dimensions that I provided. So age, business type, job title, and then geo profile for where they were registered for, and then some other, the gender and the breakout by age. So you can see this is a one-page dashboard, but it provides a ton of information for people within our company. Somebody could say to me, how many people are totally registered for the show? Bam, it's right there. How much money did we generate so far? Who are the main people that are attending our show? And then you can start to see and break it down. And if you hover, I know Tamsin had a map on hers. I used one of my favorites is this hex map. So it gives everything for the states the same size. So at least if you hover over it, you can start to see, the breakdown of what where the attendees are coming from.
So Rhode Island disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ones that are not colored in, we had no attendees from those states. So when you think about this, and this is a presentation of data, and now I'm going to start to flip over to one of my slides, and I added literally two different components to it. And I was able to just do a little bit of a story. So this data that I used was from one show. So what I mocked up in the second one, you'll understand it was not from other stuff. But when you think about the context and the questions you want to address, like what was our total registered this year versus last year? What was our dollars that we generated this year versus last year? Maybe we had a pricing change. You know, are you seeing different changes year over year over all of these things that I'm presenting? And like, here's one piece I added right in the middle. Okay, we're down 7%. Now 7% is what I use as like the number of registrations. So I did it as like 12,000 registrations. So it's telling a story that we're down on registrations. So maybe at different points within our registration process, we should tell our marketing team, listen, you're down 10%, you're down 20%. So this is telling a story without me even doing anything and annotating any of these, any of the visualizations. So I think it's really key to, like I said, when you first start out, talk about what are the questions you think the business will want to know. And the thing is, you can interview them. I did. That's how I started out, is what do we want to see? And I interviewed the president, the rest of the executive team, the marketing team, the sales team. They all want to see something different. Granted, this is a one-page dashboard, but you can create a multi-page dashboard that you know, I have one that's listed here. It says starter, finished, and finished part 2. But you could have one that's for marketing, one that's for sales, one that's a, you know, an executive write-up. But I think that one of the key things I want to explain to everyone is this is, just have to think about what you want to do. And it's very easy just to start, because this is a one source dashboard with multiple visualizations. And like I said, I used one measure. So you can start to play around, and I think that some of these things will start to hit home. I'm gonna stop sharing, and let's go back to. Can you pull up? So I just want to talk about a couple of resources. I know someone mentioned earlier, there are a ton of things that you can use. It's from some major Power BI resources. Somebody talked about their Power BI user groups. I think you can get it from the powerbi.com site. And they're all ones within, I think, each state. There's one in New York City, at least that I can attend to. They have events like a lot of other stuff. But one of the ones I have is very near and dear to my heart, is the one that's listed on the left-hand side, is enterprisedna.co. It's actually a Australian-based company. It's the first person up there that I outlined is Sam Mackay. There's actually a lot of free content on that site. They have multiple webinars, usually at least one a month. And it was the basis how I learned how to use Power BI. And he's one of the easiest people to follow. The other one I would recommend for people is sqlbi.com. That's in the bottom right. I think, Tamsin, you have used that as well.
They have, so I've done their advanced DAX, but they also have on their site a free recorded basic DAX. So it's a great place to get started if you just want to get familiar with, you know, the ins and out of DAX and some relatively straightforward and simple formulas.
Cool. Hey, thanks to you both. So I'm going to take the last 5 minutes or so just to talk about a little bit about Acumen. So, you know, we've talked about the general value of data visualization, about Power BI, and how you can get started with some cool stuff for free. But when you talk about scaling this, like really doing it for a business, you're going to have to deal with, you know, cross departments, cross multiple sources. You know, probably something a little bit more robust is going to be necessary. So most of you on the call know that A2 offers a platform that's designed specifically for this purpose. And I just want to talk a little bit about why you would want to use a platform like that, right? And the main one is to get there faster, right? So probably some of you on the call could build some of this stuff, you know, with given enough time and enough resources, you know, but going with a product like Acumen, it's gonna have that standard data model, right? So all those joins, all those measures, all these things that would be difficult to learn how to do and to develop are gonna kind of be there for you right out of the box, right? These visualizations, they can be complicated, right? I mean, it can take some time to put these together and to perfect them. So you start with best practice, right? Templates for visualizations across all those different modules, not to mention the integrations with all of your different source systems. So, you know, we've been doing this for a long time, right? We thought about the way that the architecture should work and all of that. Thought about the models for support and things of that sort. So all of that is just really to get you to where you want to be a little bit faster. So here's kind of how it works. Like what we've been talking about most of today is this, right? Going from a single source system with a couple of tabular data sources, right? And putting that into Power BI and then creating a visualization, which we would then export and share. So what we're talking about with Acumen is basically the same thing, but it's just a little bit more robust, right? So we have multiple sources, multiple different ways of extracting the data from those sources, kind of a fully baked cloud infrastructure where we have a data lake storage area or a staging area. Data comes there, then it gets transformed into our data warehouse, which is all modeled, right, to take in data from all of those different source systems. And then from there, we go to a semantic layer and visualizations built out in Power BI. So it's kind of like just a little bit more scaled version of what you've been looking at. So in the finished product would look something like this, and you have kind of multiple business areas, sales, membership, events, community, things like sponsorships and exhibits for your events, predictive models. All of these things kind of come with product, and once you get all the data into one place, it's a little bit easier to do some of these things. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is a custom workspace, right? So the last thing you'd want to do after investing the time to learn Power BI is to have something that's totally rigid that you can't really expand on or modify in any way. So this is my Acumen. It's custom workspace. You have access to all the things that come with Acumen, the data model, and all of the reports. What's cool about that is you can add new data and you can modify the things that come with the product, right? So all the skills that you learned are not wasted. And with that, you can do some cool stuff, right? So this is a kind of a timely piece. It's COVID-19 and memberships by state. So basically you're just taking your member data, combining that with a publicly available source of data on COVID cases. It's from Johns Hopkins, and combining that so you can look at kind of impact, right? Where are the places where you have a lot of members that are also hard hit by COVID, and you can choose from different measures like, number of cases or fatality rates and things like that. So this is just one example that's, it's only limited by, your creativity and your skill set when it comes to that. So that's a, really, 2-minute version of Acumen. We're going to look at Acumen a little bit more in a couple of weeks. We have a topic coming up called Smart Analytics to drive results. And we'll have Greg from our team running, some software there that you might be interested to take a look at. And so with that, we're about 2 minutes left. I'm going to go to some closing thoughts. Tamsin.
So I like to point out, we actually submitted these to Bill separately. So I like that we both start small, because I always feel like you can't break anything in Power BI. It's just consuming the data. It's not writing back. You don't have to worry about screwing up data in your database. So just, go for it, to just dive in, start with small objectives to make it easy. That's mostly to make it easy on yourself. Because if you start big, you can get overwhelmed quickly.
That I can agree with. I also agree to start small and aim big. My biggest thing is learn to tell a story. First of all, there is no shortage of data in this world. So learn to communicate it and tell a story. One of the best ways is through Power BI. So for everyone, good luck and Godspeed on your data journey.
Good. Thanks, Matt. Okay. So thanks to both the panelists, to Tamsin and Matt, and especially all the audience for your comments and your questions. Hope you can join us in the future for more of these discussions. A couple of things. This is a recurring meeting, right? So most of you have joined before, but you have access to attend all of our future events. You can get a weekly reminder and instructions on how to add these to your calendar. So here's a description and titles of some of our upcoming events. And for next week, the next installment in our webinar series, we'll be diving into content strategy and delivery, and we'll be taking a peek at the A2 recommendations engine. Thanks again, everybody, for a fabulous discussion. As Dilo would say, hope your minds are full and your cups are empty, and we hope to see you next week. Have a great day. and happy Independence Day to all.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Tamsin.
You guys enjoy that food
Bye.
this weekend.